What's happening, everyone? I got a pretty cool play right here. This is the SPX, and this video is mainly going to be about the SPXS, which is the short. But for now, let's take a look at the reasons why we would be looking at getting into the SPX short. So the SPX on the weekly time frame is getting some massive bearish divergence. On the daily, it's fallen out of this rising channel. I'm thinking we're going to be working our way slowly down to this trend line again, which could bring us down to 3,500 or even as low as, I'll show you the price targets in a few. I can't really remember right now what it was until I get to it. But let's hide this TD9 flash. So right now on the daily, we are getting support on this 20 daily. But we are having massive bearish divergence that has caused this crash. We had a MACD negative cross. The support right now is at 36.31. So a break below that would be a great time to start shorting it. If we do get a bounce here, then it's not a good time to start shorting. But we're going to keep an eye on those levels. If we look at the hourly, we do look like we could be coming up, but the RSI does look like it's rolling over a little bit as well. But this cross coming in could bring us up and create some kind of head and shoulders pattern. And this is only on the hourly, so this could happen pretty quickly, actually, over the course of the next day or two, as far as it coming down again. But I do expect a little bit of a bounce potentially in the morning. So the SPXS would be coming down a little bit, which would give a good buying opportunity for some calls. I'll tell you a date and stuff when I get into the SPXS. We could get a little bit of a double bottom potentially on this 4-hourly on the SPX because it did get a little bounce, but I do expect it to come down at least to this line. If we break this line, then we're going to be coming down as low as we have in the past or potentially close to it. We are under the 4-hourly 20 EMA, which we're getting resistance on at the 36.76 level. So if we get above that, then you can expect that we'll probably come back up and test a little bit higher for a little bit. But like I said, I think that we're going to be, even if we get a little bounce here, I think we're going to be slowly working our way down. So let's take a look at the SPXS. It's very cheap. It came all the way down to $4.07 actually. And recently we got some daily MACD crosses. We got a nice rounding bottom. And the RSI is starting to roll up and whatnot. We have some bullish divergence. But let's try to find some support and resistance lines here and play around a little bit and see what we can figure out. So I'm going to draw a line from that wick that came down in the past that we seem to have bounced right off of and bought right back up earlier in its life here. So as you see on the MACD, we got a nice cross up. On the daily time frame, we made a nice W there. And as of right now, we are getting bearish divergence on the SPX, which makes sense because we're getting the opposite on the SPX. This is a tongue twister to keep saying this shit. But there's your bearish divergence at the moment. So I do expect us to come back down, which would make sense because we could create some kind of double bottom there on that 407 level. So we had that green daily TD9 flash, and that helped bring us up. And now look at the weekly. On the weekly, we are getting a massive, massive green TD9 flash. So that to me is signaling that this thing is going to be having some great upwards movement. We could come up to that 462 level on it. I mean, I'm not too sure how the TD9 flashes as far as if it comes up to the top of the green TD9 candle, or I haven't done enough research on that. But I do want to talk about this massive bullish divergence that we're getting here. As you see on the RSI, this W that we're starting to create is starting to look like it's straight across, and on the price action, it's way lower on the right, and this is on the weekly time frame. So, that could be a pretty good size move for this thing. On the hourly, we obviously had a little bit of a sell-off. We're catching support right now around 422 level, which is that hourly EMA, and we did have a nice golden cross. So if we do hold support here, that wouldn't be a bad thing at all, because it would give time for this 4-hourly 20 EMA to start rounding up. We don't have any more death crosses or anything coming in on this thing, and pretty much all the negative shit has happened. And now it's just, a matter of creating higher lows and whatnot as we move up. So we do have this bearish divergence. So, I do expect us to come back down to cancel this out and whatnot. So, it's not out of the question that we're going to move up, move down, move up, move down, and do a little bit of that action while the SPX is getting a little bounce until it gets rejected again, and we'll continue doing the opposite, so on and so forth. But, this could turn into some type of inverse head and shoulders. We could come on the right shoulder that we create. It could be around 415 after the SPX starts to get its bounce, and then it gets rejected and comes back down. As we were showing on the hourly, the SPX looking like it could make a head and shoulders pattern, while this is looking like it could create an inverse head and shoulders pattern. Does the opposite. So, these calls are going to be very cheap to make, because it's so damn low. But, I'm just going to draw some trend lines here, screw around, and see what we can create here. So if you look at this, our support right now, 423, 422 in those areas. That's in this little bit of a rising channel that we're creating. If we draw a trend line here and all these wicks that we've had to the bottom, if we do come down and create a W and we get a lower low, you could look for resistance from support around the 401 area. It's very possible. But, I still have a feeling that we're going to catch pretty good support somewhere in this range. So I'm going to be looking for maybe putting in some calls around this 415 level. And I actually already made some calls on it, honestly, for around March. So I'm just going to keep adding to my position every low chance that I get on this. Some option calls and stuff. So, this, we got a little spinning top on the 4-hourly. So it is insinuating a spinning top candle where you can see there's a wick top and a wick bottom. Wick on both sides with the little bit of candle showing in the middle there. That's a spinning top. So we're in this rising channel on the 4-hourly. So say we were going to break down, which I'm expecting to happen on Monday. Let's see where the price action would bring us. So we take a measure move here. And if this next candle is a breakdown, then it could bring us to 409, which would be a nice double bottom pattern if we come up and come there and then round back up. And that could look pretty good. And we could have a nice W break. We've been having a lot of massive volume come in here. So a lot of people are interested right now. And this thing is pretty damn low. I think it's probably its lowest it's been. So, let's see how it would look if on the 4-hourly if we were to come down and create that. So we've been getting some bounces right on these wicks here on the RSI. So if we did come down, I would probably look for at the RSI when we get to this low and see if we start getting a bounce there. And if we do, we could create a nice inverse head and shoulders. Potentially, it kind of looks like it a little bit. That could be speculation, or it could just create another W and take a little extra time. We'll have to see how that plays out. I'm not expecting the thing to blow up tomorrow or anything like that. Like I said, this is going to take a little bit of time. I'm talking about March calls here. But, it is looking healthy. So this could be a moneymaker if you do a long on this thing. So let's see what kind of pattern it's in right now and see what's going on. So I'm going to draw some trend lines from all these wicks on the top and all these wicks on the bottom and see where we're at. And this should show us the pattern, which it looks like a nice falling wedge here that we caught support off, got a nice bounce. So if for some reason the SPX was going to, let's see if this thing comes back down and gets this inverse head and shoulders or so, and we were to break out somewhere in that area, then we would be coming down to the 415 or the 409 area and getting a nice bounce up to the 472 level. On the daily, I mean, this is me drawing out random shit, but it could come up to that 472, get rejected, come down, retest the pattern for support, all these different things. That's just speculation because I don't know what it's going to do in the future. I'm just looking at the present. And if we're going to break out actually sooner than that and have like a red candle on the daily tomorrow and then the next day start pumping, then we could break out and we could even have a higher breakout target depending on when this pattern breaks out. So now let's look in the past a little bit and see those two wicks coming down on the left. I'm going to draw a trend line across there to show me some of the old resistance or old support that could be now resistance, which is looking around the 472 level. So we could get, potentially have some hard times getting above that. So now we have all these trend lines drawn in. It looks all crazy to us, but, if we also broke it down a little so it's easier to understand. On the hourly, it's looking like it could turn into some type of inverse head and shoulders potentially, depending on how this plays out, or it could turn into the W. So if it's going to turn into inverse head and shoulders here, and we're going to actually end up getting a bounce sometime tomorrow, then we could actually have a pretty good target up in this 482 level. And if we do get into that 482 level and we catch support on this old resistance line, could trend sideways for a little bit and start working our way up from there. So I'm going to draw another trend line here because I want to show some more potential resistance. And I know it's starting to look all funky here, but this is how I do things because it shows me potential support and resistance. So if we do break through that level and come back down and test it and catch support, we'll get that inverse head and shoulders in this sense. And if we were to get that and we were to break out of this pattern here, if we do create something here, and this is all, like I said, speculation because we don't know what exactly it's going to do, but I just know it's looking good, then our next move up would be looking at like 510. So, I mean, these are all things that I'm going to memorize and I'm going to remember, and I'm going to keep all these lines here. I'm going to look back at the chart throughout the next few days and weeks, and I'm going to see how this is all playing out and see what happens here. So now if we do something like that and end up getting up in that area, we're going to have to take a look at our next potential resistance level above. And this is me all planning ahead, whether I know it's going to happen or not. This is where we're going to have to look for if we get in that area. So I'm going to draw some lines from these old wicks that were coming down and testing some type of support level, and we were bouncing off of. And that's around the 506 level. So even though our breakout target's a little bit higher, it's possible we come up to the breakout target and then fall back in, and maybe we'll trend inside these lines for a little bit. But this will be like some type of resistance as well. So we have all these lines in here. This won't all happen in a day, but it could happen over, the next few months or weeks, who knows. But that weekly green TD9 flash is showing me that we are going to have some type of big move coming. So if we can try to find a date on this would be great. So the way that I'm going to do that is take some trend lines from the old resistance that we've been rejected off of in the past, and we're going to try to find some type of bottom. I don't think that this is going to do anything here, but for the hell of it, I'm going to just put it here and see what happens. I just play around with lines. This is how I learned a lot of this shit. I literally just played around with lines, and I never put any bets in, and I just watched it. That doesn't look like it's going to do anything here, though, but that's okay. I'm going to keep it where it was, which is where we got support in the past, which will now be resistance. As you see, we got support there. We bounced up, came back down. We fell under it. Then it turned into resistance. Then we broke down. Couldn't catch support on the next line. Now that next line is resistance right now. So if we can break through that, we'll be starting to move upwards. So right now, up in this old resistance of the old peaks and whatnot, that's now the new resistance there. It was always resistance, but now it's more resistance, but it also came lower, so the price target of hitting it and breaking out would actually be lower. So now I'm looking at the weekly time frame, and I'm going to run these trend lines back down, make sure that they didn't move on me. Nope, they're still touching the wick. That's good. So this is the massive pattern that it was in, and it had some type of fake or just a breakdown because the SPX has gone on such a big rally. It's causing this to fall through. But now, since we're starting to get bearish sentiment in the SPX, the SPXS that fell through is starting to find a bottom, circulate back up, and we could actually be trying to break out of this pattern here. So based off of this right here, I mean, it could be even bigger breakout. It's really hard to go drawing trend lines from the very, very, very top of this because it had a pretty good run at one point, or it's up pretty high. But, we're going to base it off of this smaller pattern here, and the breakout target of that is 652. So, I mean, that's why for me, I'm probably going to do some $5 calls. See if we're going way up here. I mean, this thing was up in like the $30, $40 range. It's probably during the COVID crash, honestly. And then when everything was crashing, this thing was blowing the fuck up. So we're going to be looking for some potential plays. And if the stock market is going to be bearish in March, April area, this is going to set us up to be positioning ourselves to make some money in the time while the stock market could be potentially correcting. And maybe I'll make a video on the Dow Jones at some point on why I expect this thing to be correcting sometime in the next few months. Because it's, getting ready to look like it's in some type of consolidation. But this isn't about Dow Jones. We'll get into that maybe another time. But that could be another potential play too. Gets yourself into some Dow Jones shorts as well, and it kind of helps protect your money in the time when Dow Jones starts coming down and all your stocks that you're invested in long term are coming down. You're actually shorting these bigger NASDAQ and S&P 500s and all these Dows and the Dow Jones, and you're making money on those while the rest of your stocks that you're investing in long term are going down. So that's what I like to do. And it'll protect you in those during those crashes or corrections or whatever you want to call them. So anyway, here's our fib extension here to check and see. This is on the SPX. We're switching over to the SPX now to see what we got going here. So we can see where it could potentially fall to if it does have a correction. So right now, it looks like it's in some type of falling wedge here. Rising wedge. And if it does decide to break down negatively out of this, then the breakdown target of that is actually looking at like 35.17, which would make sense because that's the 50 daily moving average, the red line. And if we were to work our way all the way down here over the next few months, we could actually get a bounce where we've gotten a bounce in the past, but it'll actually be a little higher, looking at the 3,200 area. But this is the rising channel we're in, and on the RSI on the daily, it's actually showing that we already have fallen out of it, which usually the RSI tells us the story more than the chart patterns themselves. I'm always looking at those RSIs for that reason. So this breakdown target could bring us down to that, and if we continue down to this bottom line on the RSI here, that could be down here, it could be sooner. I mean, you don't know. I mean, we could think it's coming down to 32.28, but it could actually bounce on like the 0.618 fib or 0.5 fib. The only way to know is by looking at the weekly RSI again, seeing am I on this trend line that I drew? If I am, what's the price target? Is it looking like it's bouncing? So on and so forth. That's why it's always good to look back at both. But back to the SPXS, which is the short. So if we're going to have these negative moves on the SPX, then the SPX short's going to be actually breaking out. So if it's going to be breaking out, then this is the pattern we ended up with after drawing all those crazy trend lines. And look at how nice and clean this looks. So our breakout target of this, and I'm sure there's many of other ways to do chart analysis than me. I do some funky shit, but hey, it works. It looks good, doesn't it? We could be trending inside this pattern here, and I went through a lot of extra steps here to get here, so maybe we could have just went to the daily and, just drawn some lines here and said, hey, look at this pattern, and it broke out negative. But hey, this is just how I ended up doing it. Somehow it worked for me, so I'm sure there's simpler ways. But as you see, 752 is looking like our breakout of this pattern if we can get back above this 472 level. As of right now, that's the resistance that we're looking to get above. Once it gets support above that, we're back inside this pattern, and then we can trend in there. So whether or not this daily is going to turn into a big W, I mean, it's hard for me to say that this is going to happen next week, in the next few weeks, or anything like that. But it is looking bullish. It is looking like it's